Hello, people, and welcome to Badger Fox Art Studio. Today we are doing yet another time lapse. However, this time it is a long one, so I decided I would pop in and chat about the process for it. Now, we are drawing Margit the Fell Omen, or Margit the Omen King, from the video game Elden Ring. Now, this is going to be the first of two parts. This week will be the fully rendered sketch, and next week will be the colorization of this sketch. Now, there is a lot of footage in this part alone. You know, it was almost 4 hours of footage, so there is a lot to get through. So let's get going. So step one was a simple sketch, which you will have seen at the very beginning of the video. Now, I did not record this sketch. It tends to take me a stupidly long amount of time to figure out a sketch. So the fact that there was so much footage without the sketch, I'm glad I didn't record it. I also tend to decide if I am going to make something into a video after I do the sketch, because, you know, if I'm happy with the sketch, then I'll more than likely be happy with everything else. So the sketch, or the rough outline, I very much approached it in my own style, and if you've been following me for a while, you will more than likely be familiar with my more stylistic character way of drawing. So I was a lot less focused on accuracy to the way he is in the game, and I was more focused on the placement of everything, and just like, you know, the way his clothes are, the way the cloak is, the horns on his head, and like those weird growth thingies on his face. Further on down the line, I did end up leaning a lot more on the references, but for now, it's a bit more stylistic. It really becomes more an interpretation of mine than just, you know, marketing my style. So the brush that we used for the simple sketch was called Pencil 1 Hard, I believe. It's just a default brush in Krita. So step 2, which is what we have been working on since the very start, is rough shading with a chalk pastel brush. It's actually called Chalk Grainy, another default brush in Krita. I love this brush. I used this one a lot during my October challenge, my Spooks and Spectres challenge. There's a couple of videos that I have on those, and I absolutely love this. I just find it so easy to use. What I have done is I created a new layer under the sketch, and I am roughing out the values and just figuring out shading and where things are going to go. And this is very rough. Things will change later on. So occasionally you will see me at some point go in with an airbrush, and just so that I can even out the values, like lighten certain areas, darken certain areas, depending on where they are. So such as with the face, I might want to bring that out a bit more, so I lighten it a bit more. I'm working on the background and the figure together because surprisingly it makes it a lot easier editing and shaping parts of the sketch. And, you know, sometimes having a lot of layers can be very confusing. You know, you just have there are simply too many layers. So what I have done now, we're on to step 3, and what I've done is I have created a new layer from the visible layer. So what I did was I hid the background because I want to preserve that. I don't want that part of the thing yet, and I merged those two visible layers. But they're on a new layer, and the original layers have been preserved. Like, they're still there, they're just hidden at the moment. And I've preserved them in case I make any mistakes on this new layer. And that is called non-destructive editing, my friends. Also just wanted to mention that the reason why I am not drawing on a pure white background, that is for the benefit of putting in highlights later. It also helps with tones to make sure that you don't do any values too light. Now, if I was doing this again, I would do a more mid-tone, or a mid-range tone, or grey. So that it would actually be a lot darker, because I did have to go in and darken things when I was colorizing it. But you will see that in the next video. So what we are working on right now is we are detailing on that new layer. We're just refining what we have. So I did try a different brush, which you may have noticed. I think it was called Chalk Detail. It was a bit too harsh for my liking. It looked cool, but it wasn't really what I was going for at this point. So I switched back to the Chalk Grainy, and what I'm doing is I am detailing the shading, and I'm also scrubbing out a lot of the more prominent construction lines, especially around his face and around the horns. There was a lot of very like scattered lines everywhere. No, there's a lot of work on this area, and yeah, a lot of time was spent here. So on this area, I ended up, as I said, moving slightly. Did I say it? I can't really remember. But I moved slightly away from my own style, and I am leaning a lot more on the references for details on the face and the clothing and stuff like that. I'm working up and pulling back values established in that rough layer, and as I said, like, I moved a little bit away from my original style. I was going to do it a bit more aligned and stylistic, and I just ended up going in with full-on shading. So as I say, I'm working up and pulling back values that I established in that rough layer. Building on what we have, I'm working up textures on the hair, the horns, the cloak, the staff. Here I decided I wanted to play with a blender to see if I could make it a bit more grainy, a bit more texture, because it was a bit too soft, but I did not succeed in introducing a bit more of a texture. So I ended up just going back and like fixing things or blending things with switching to eraser mode and back and forth between eraser and brush mode. So as I said, we're building up textures on the horns, and also later on down the line you will see me fixing the placement of certain elements in the drawing, and as I said, that'll be later. I will also be fixing details that I originally mistook for something else. So such as, you know, when I was doing the sketch, I had a whole load of references and they were all very small on my screen because they were all packed in together. Under his chin, I thought he had like a wispy beard, but it actually just ended up being lighting on the structure of his neck, and there wasn't actually much beard hair there. So I did end up fixing that in this particular layer, because this is all building up the detail, building up the shading and the textures and everything. I also fixed up the anatomy. A lot of that focus on the start was the anatomy of his face, his arm, the placement of his fingers, so like the veins on the arms, the hairs on the arms, the hairs on his head, those growth thingies on his face as well. So that's really all that I have to talk about. You know, I will talk about what I mentioned earlier later on when it actually happens in the video. It's more towards the end of the video. So for now, I'm gonna just, you know, chat about why I decided to draw Margit the Fell Omen. So a disclaimer here, I have never actually played Elden Ring. I don't have the facilities to do so. But I have, however, spent several hours watching my brother play this game, and my very, very first experience of the game was watching my brother dying to Margit over and over and over again. To my understanding, Margit is the first major boss that you fight in the game, so you know your player isn't very well spec'd at this point. So it seems to be a big challenge to fight him. Now, I love the characters in this game. There are some great characters. Margit is probably my favorite overall. I do also have a great love for Blythe and E.G. If you know the game, you know the characters. Recently, I watched a playlist of videos on YouTube by VaatiVidya. I will leave a link to his channel in the description below. He does a lot of lore for games and stuff, and it's amazing how much he figures things out. But he has a playlist called Prepare to Cry, which deals mostly with the quest lines in the game. And I ended up just gaining a lot more love and respect for the characters after watching them, especially Margit or Morgott. His story was actually really sad. Like, I teared up a little, I'm not gonna lie. I did actually cry during his explanation, or his playthrough, or whatever you want to call it, of the Rani questline, the Princess Rani questline. That was mostly because of Blight and EG. Oh my god, it was really sad. But anyway, yeah, back to my boy Margit here, and why like another reason why I love him so much as a character, and that reason is because the voice actor who plays him, Anthony Howell, I believe is his name. He has a great voice, and yeah, I have a terrible habit of falling in love with people who have amazing voices, and he has a fantastic voice, and he also played him so well. Like, the acting was just really, really good. And he had some great iconic lines that you get to hear over and over again when he keeps killing you. You know, lines like, well, thou art of passing skill. But I think my personal favourite is the second time you fight him as like the sort of ghosty wosty Margit. The Omen illusion, I believe, is what they call it. And you know, he comes out with the line, "I see thee, little tarnished," and the way he said it, it just got me. It really got me, and my response to that part was, "Oh, okay, Daddy Margaret, I see you." And me referring to Margaret as Daddy Margaret just became a sort of a running joke between myself and my brother. Like, it became a sort of a meme, and it just kind of stuck. And it's you know, I find it funny because he's a big, monstrous looking fella, and he just because he has a nice voice, I ended up calling him Daddy Margaret. And anywho, we are coming towards the end of the video now, and I'm currently working here on like a lot of the textures of the hair, and you will see me starting to fix a lot of the elements that were kind of wrong. You will see that in a little bit. So yeah, the hair took a while because I didn't really want to make it look like the video game hair. It was also quite difficult because of the placement. You know, he has a lot of horns on his head, so the hair kind of grows around it, so it looks odd, but that's the way it was. So over here we are heading over to these two horns here at the side of the head. There were two big long horns that come out at the side of his head, and the placement of the one on the bottom was very wrong, and I do fix that. Now, drawing these horns was quite difficult. I loved the way they turned out in the end, but it was quite difficult to figure it out, and you know, there's a lot of twists with the shape of it. Where you place the lines, like those light and dark lines, it really, really affected it. Like, so, you know, I had to be very careful with how I placed it. And here you can see that I've just, after erasing a lot of area there in the background, just mapping out where that horn is supposed to go, or you know, roughly where it's supposed to go, because it's not the most accurate drawing, and it was never supposed to be, really. With this amount of detail, surprisingly, it wasn't supposed to be. But anyway, I realized that the time-lapse really does make it look like I know what I'm doing when it comes to doing those horns. But you know, it was really trial and error. I was figuring out as I go along, because like, I don't draw horns very often on characters. So I had to figure out, right, what way am I doing the texture on these to make it look like they're horns and that they twist and turn in all different directions. And it really had to do with the placement of the those lines, the ridges that are in them. So here I am heading back to the cloak, and we are going to be building up a lot of textures and structure. I I've hopped over here to the staff. Now this is another reason why I don't do a lot of tutorials, because I hop around a drawing a lot. I might be working on one area and then I'll hop over to another area completely. But anyway, I do make the head of this staff bigger because it did need to be a lot bigger. Now his head also probably should be a bit smaller, but I was in no mood to change it, and I think I drew the head small enough. I was, when I was doing that sketch, I was just shrinking the head so much that I just ended up just stopping myself and saying, no, it's small enough now, just carry on, we'll be here all day. Anyway, as you can see here, I'm building up the structure of the staff. It's like a really gnarled wooden staff, and I do make the head a bit bigger. You will see it, yeah, right there. Just made it a bit bigger. And we're working up the structures, and soon I will be putting in a texture. And the way I did that texture was I literally just made that chalk grainy brush quite big, put it into eraser mode and just dotted it about so that you got this grainy texture. And then I went back over it in brush mode just to like even it out, or just lightly shade those new textures so that they blend in a little bit more into the areas of detail. And yeah, so yeah, just applying a lot more of those textures around the cloak, around the collar of the cloak, and we should be pretty much done. Yeah, and that is it for part 1. So here we have the fully rendered sketch. I am really proud of this, and I am super glad that I decided to go down this route instead of doing just like line art and color and shading effects, which, I love doing that too, but I am glad that I decided to go into so much detail and, work up a load of textures. I'm really happy with it. So I have actually worked on the colorization. That's all this up here, but you're not allowed to see it yet. That's for the next video. So yeah, that next video will be the colorization of this piece of artwork. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a little bit about my process. If you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out, and I would really appreciate it. I hope you have a good day. Stay creative, my people, and I shall see you in the next one. Bye!